This meeting is called to order and welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena administrative meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary during the meeting. Please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage and your participation. Madam Clerk.
City Attorney Doctor.
Here.
Interim City Manager Burton.
Here.
Commissioner Dean.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Shirtliff.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Thank you. Commission comments and questions, anyone? Well, I got something I need to discuss. I know in 2020, I was part of the resolution that brought about the climate change and all of that. And I've noticed that we have kind of slowed down on, don't get me wrong, I know we've made some progress in our climate resolution and all of that. But I still think we've slowed down and we need to pick it up. And I'm aware that part of the reason was we were looking for a sustainability coordinator. We do have that. And I think we need to encourage the coordinator. Maybe we need to even think about putting that coordinator in a visible spot that we can access. So commissioners, Mr. Manager, I want us to look into the resolution that we passed on the climate change. And let's pick up the work we need to do. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your comments. I would love to see some movement forward on it. A couple of the things that I've been thinking of, if we could maybe have a presentation from the sustainability coordinator, reviewing steps taken to date, future plans. I think that would be really helpful. I don't know, perhaps there was a meeting where we met the sustainability coordinator and I was not here, but I would love to meet them. I also had wondered if it was possible, and I was not going to have this conversation today, but we may as well, if it's possible when we're doing budgeting to have a sort of pullout of sustainability related issues from all of the departments presented at once. Because I think that things are scattered around and it can be difficult to assess sort of holistically what work we are doing on sustainability measures. And lastly, I think I agree with your comments on the sustainability coordinator. I think increased visibility would be a really good thing. So thank you.
Any other comments? Please go ahead.
Well, Mayor, your point's well taken. I would remind the commission that I think it was 2 weeks ago when the CCB board was reauthorized. And so that takes time. That we do have the sustainability coordinator, and we can certainly do bring forward a report that the commission talked about, and kind of a status report. And I think it's probably worthwhile to review the resolution. How was it created? Where did the benchmarks come from? And I think that there are people on the board itself that can say, here's where this number comes from. And get re-familiar with the resolution itself. And just to let you know that not at the next joint meeting, but probably the next city county joint meeting, we'll have a report on the ongoing joint city county solid waste master plan, which is pretty significant in this area as well. So there is work taking place. It may not be visible, but it's all very important, and I think it sets the program up for the future.
Good.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Really briefly, I think a presentation would be awesome. I think one thing, I mean, we talk about this frequently, sometimes we're not as good at communicating our successes. I think it would be really helpful to have some of the initiatives and investments that we've made maybe in one place. I know just even this last budget cycle with facilities, I mean, part of the budget was Troy's budget was purchasing the data collection system so that we actually understand the energy usage in all of our buildings, investing in the solid waste master plan. You know, the police department continues to utilize hybrid vehicles. That saves us not just lots of money, but also is better for the environment. In addition to a number of other items. I do also think, and I was gonna bring this up later, and I'll bring it up then, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to be pursuing some of the grant opportunities within the bipartisan infrastructure bill to help further these efforts. Which I would hope that we would all be in favor of. But I think part of this is just communicating the successes, because if you look at the amount of money that we've invested over the last 3 years as compared to, I would say, given the size of our community, I think sometimes we get a lot of comments of, well, how do you compare it to Bozeman and Missoula? Well, Bozeman and Missoula are 2, almost 3 times larger than us. And as a percent of our budget, we've been investing in the millions of dollars over the last 3 budget cycles. So I think if we can communicate that, it'll be helpful.
Thank you. Any
Mr.
others?
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I also think, and I'm sure will come out in any presentation that we get, that there have been a number of successes that the city has had going back more than a decade. And we sometimes forget about that. And so that's an important piece of the story as well. And these issues are, as I pointed out at our first administrative meeting, as well as a War and Peace op-ed that I did recently. There's a lot of needs in the city, you know, and so it's kind of speaks to our need, not just the governing body, but staff and the public of prioritizing all of those needs, because it's going to be, you know, we could say we could put sustainability issues as our top priority. But is it? I mean, when we consider public safety, water, wastewater, all those sorts of things, it is one of many priorities that we have. And so, you know, I think we've got to get about the business of, you know, setting out those priorities for ourselves and the community. Thank you.
And I hear you, Commissioner, just that I think most of those other top priorities have been on the top burner. And I think sustainability has been slowly going down by the wayside, and I want us to bring it back up. That's what I'm trying to do.
Mayor, Commission, I just want to say is I look forward to being able to give a sustainability one, because both the previous sustainability coordinator, Leah Anderson, she has done an amazing job. So we have been keeping going forward. We just haven't been as visible as we should be. I mean, as the commissioner said, we do not celebrate our successes as we should be. So this in no way has been put on back burner, and we have been doing a lot of great stuff. So I look forward to being able to present that to the.
Thank you. Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council, Patricia Beek. Is she around?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Patricia Brick, and I'm a District 1 representative on the HCC. And the HCC recently and unanimously approved recommendations to the City Commission
Madam
regarding
Clerk,
the.
is it, she's breaking up and she's not loud enough? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but
Okay, I'm hearing echo. Is that better?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So regarding city advisory boards, the commission should receive the HCC's recommendations. Secondly, we look forward to participating in the selection of the new city manager. And thirdly, this week, the HCC polled its elected representatives regarding the the disbursement of funds for the ARPA projects. Two elements arose to the surface with full consensus of HCC representatives in that polling process. The first is that food share under HCC recommends to be fully or partially funded. That's a unanimous call. And the second unanimous call was that no funding should be allotted to the Carroll College project. A letter will follow up later this week with a full discussion of HCC's recommendations. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you. City manager report.
Mayor, I have nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Engineering standards.
Mayor Commissioner, thank you. This is just another kind of presentation to follow up. We've been going through the public process to try and get the engineering standards updated, and we're very close to the finish line, but we want to make sure that you understand everything that is being affected by the engineering standards and all the comments and how we addressed everything. So we just wanted to go through a few that have come up, be able to talk to you and have the conversation upfront before we take it to adoption, so everyone is comfortable about it. The three comments that we'll look at, and there's been a couple others that are coming today that I'll turn it over to Jamie Clark, our city engineer, to talk about it, is the 3 to 4 inch asphalt. I know that you've been brought forward the 20-inch drive or 20-foot driving lanes, and then the copper services. So those are the main ones we're just going to specifically look at, but we can go through any of the other standards that you would like to, but I'll just turn it over to Jamie at this time and he can sort of speak to those.
Mayor and commissioners, the issues that had come up, first of all, was the copper service lines. Copper service lines were pretty firm belief by the utility maintenance department. They want to keep the copper service lines, and keep in mind, this is just in the right of way. For individual residences from their valve to their house, they're free to put in whatever meets plumbing code. Copper service lines allow the utility maintenance department to locate the lines when they're within city right of way, so they aid utility projects, finding them and making sure we don't dig through existing ones. And if we were to switch away from copper service lines, which I guess I don't feel really strongly one way or the other about, it's mostly been brought forth by the utility maintenance department. It would require contractors to install tracer wire on them anyhow, so they could be located, which is another step in the installation process. And we kind of felt at the time that the difference in cost might be negligible when you factor in the labor factor to do that. And the last thing is that copper service lines have shown to have 2 to 3 times the design life of polyethylene, usually with the minimum design life about 50 years when you put them in. I know my father's failed. It was plastic after about 25 years. So that's something I personally dealt with. And then the other standard that came up was the 3 to 4 inch asphalt thickness. Initially in the rewrite, it was at 4 inches. We held public meetings. We had 9 total public meetings, 3 working groups with industry people over several years. And I have all that documented if you want me to go through the nitty-gritty of all the meetings. And we actually changed that from 4 inches back to 3 inches after comment. We took that into account, and David in the transportation department decided to listen to the public or the comments we got both from industry and actually reduce it to 3 inches or put it back to 3 inches. So it's actually not 4 inches in the draft standards, it's 3. 32-foot driving lanes or 32-foot lanes road width is basically so we can bring the city in accordance with fire code, with NFPA fire code, and that's a 20-foot clear driving lane. And then 8 foot, which is standard for parking widths. So we have 20 foot for the driving lane and then 6 foot on either side for parking lanes. We're actually including the curb and gutter in that 8 foot, which is standard for a parking width. So that's actually kind of a little out of the ordinary. Typically, the 8 foot will be included in the asphalt to asphalt length to the start of the curb and gutter. So those were the 3 main issues that came up. And then I understand today some comments came in about underground
runoff storage, stormwater storage, and the new standards don't forbid underground storage of stormwater. All the engineering standards have a variance process or a deviation process rather. And underground storage of stormwater is still allowed under the new standards. It just has to have a controlled release, and it's just a little more of an engineered design. And so that item is actually still allowed under the new standards as well.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Thank you. Just a question on what you said to make sure I understand. So in the, those underground stormwater, would that require a variance automatically, or it would not? 'Cause that was a little.
It would not, Mayor and Commissioners, it would not, as long as there's an engineered outlet point for the storage. What's not permitted without a deviation is subsurface ground, stormwater storage without an outlet. And if you remember July 3rd, there's some issues with pumping a bunch of rainwater into the ground without an outlet.
Mr.
Well,
Mayor,
I just want to, is your presentation complete?
My understanding was I just was to answer a couple of
Okay.
questions about the questions that had come in. Mayor, Commissioners, I had made a previous admin meeting presentation on the standards, where I went through all the changes.
Okay.
If there's any other things you'd like to ask me about, I'm happy to answer.
I think that my question has been answered.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is sort of a general question, but some of the comments we got today suggested that some of the standards, including the underground stormwater, which has been addressed, might make it more difficult for people to develop housing, affordable housing in our community. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure what the best process is to evaluate our standards against concerns about the ability to build affordable housing. So I guess, you know, the sort of cost benefit analysis and things that might be unduly burdensome. I guess a general question is, how do we respond to that overall criticism? And is there a way that we can ensure that our standards are not, for lack of a better term, over-engineered, thereby making it difficult for people to develop housing affordably in our community?
Mayor Commission, I can take that and Jamie can add in if necessary, is we have to make sure we comply with the MS4 permit. It's a permit that comes down from EPA to DEQ. So we have to be in standard with that. And we have been in conjunction with all of the other major MS4s to try and get our standards and what we require for even LID standards and what we need to do for water quality. That's our biggest problem or biggest issue that we have for MS4 is we have to get water quality and infiltrate the first half inch. So how we do that is what we're taking a look at. So there's a lot of work done to make sure we're in compliance with all of the other major MS4 permits. What we're really looking at here is to try and have an outlet so that if something does fail in the underground storage, that it actually is monitored to be able to go out instead of just putting it into a basin and hope everything gets infiltrated into the ground in a timely manner. And if it does not, and does not have an outlet, then there are bigger issues that you can see once the ground gets saturated. Once the detention ponds get there, you have the overflow. We want to make sure that there is the overflow that is controlled so we don't have unexpected consequences if we have some storms that are coming in succession. And so we're just trying to have a little bit of a design to make sure we can maintain them. Make sure that we can monitor them. That is another big concern, out of sight, out of mind. So those are kind of where we're at, but we have taken that into consideration. And we are looking at stuff with our stormwater of what we can already use with our existing detention that's been put in throughout the years too.
Mayor and Commission, the only other thing I would add was then in April 2019, we did hire an outside firm to review and format and check our stormwater standards at a cost of about $15,000, I think, and we had Morrison Merrily do that, and he's a PhD that was recognized expert in the field.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, in addition to stormwater, just the sort of general standards beyond stormwater, do we have any other areas that may be concerning or that we would want to respond to besides specifically stormwater?
Besides that, yes, I also heard about the copper service line. Which other cities in, among the big seven carries that?
Within Mayor and Commission, within Montana, I'm not sure that any require only copper. When I did a little bit of research today, short notice for this meeting, I did find that city of Spokane still requires copper service lines for anything under 2 inches.
So no big seven carry that.
Within Montana, no. Well, they allow it, but they also allow C901 polyethylene pipe as well. And again, the standard just is for the right of way. It's not for the service line beyond the city right of way.
Thank you. Any other comments from you?
I guess, so on that question, I don't know if we have the math right now. I understand, my understanding is that the argument is that the lifespan is greater. Do we say, I mean, how much does it cost? Like, say that we did allow it in the right of way. Is there a cost to the citizens of Helena should it fail?
Mayor Commission, I'd take that one, is what we're looking at too, is also with copper, not only for when being able to track it better, to trace it, to know where it is, even though it is the adjacent property owner's responsibility to locate your main, it doesn't happen. So we do it, so we have a better locate, so we know where it is when we're replacing a main in the future. Tearing up a unlocated service can cause a lot of issues and a lot of change orders. With the lifespan of the copper is where you're gonna get it, is we have more cuts in the road. The quicker we cut a road, or more often we cut a road, the less life that it has in that. So we're looking at the overall long-term longevity of the streets and everything for that copper. Is to be able to go there and get it just in the right of way, and we're trying to do a little bit more so we can protect David's infrastructure, and that's where you're going to see it come into the residents of the city of Helena, and you're looking at, around $253-300 of a difference between putting the poly in and a copper service line. And we do have a variance to be able to allow for poly to go in if you are in corrosive soil. We recognize that corrosive soils can eat copper. So we do have a variance process to be able to go through and be able to take it in. And if copper does take a jump again, and we end up seeing that, who knows, it could go up and you're starting to see thousands and thousands of dollars. We are always taking a look at that to see how we can keep it within the standards and not just saying we're doing this carte blanche.
When you say 250 to 300 per what?
Per service that goes in, like in a new development, is, so each one is, so it'd be each lot.
Each lot.
Each service itself would be about $200 to $300 more. Or difference.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments from the commission? At this time, any public comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners and staff. Mark Ronco with Mountain View Meadows at 431 South Alice Street. I'm going to read my comments as I made them before I came. I know some things have been changed that I found out about it.
Would you speak up, please? Because I just got a notice from the clerk saying we need to speak louder, and please pull the mics closer to you because the people online are not hearing us.
Okay. I don't know if I'm on.
Yeah, you on.
I'm on. Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to express some thoughts about and concerns about some of the proposed engineering standards that could, even as they are right now, add as much as $5,000 to $7,000 to a home cost, a new home cost in Helena. There are three main ones that I want to comment on. One is 5.2.10, which is regarding the minimum thickness of the number of lifts for the asphalt. I just learned today that the thickness had been reduced to 3 from 4 back to 3 inches. So that we appreciate. it still says that it's in 2 lifts. That in itself would be very expensive. I don't know if that was an oversight or if that's even possible to do or not. I didn't have time to check with my supplier. If we did, and the MPW states that 3 inches is the maximum lift, so it would still be in compliance, and that's what's typically been done for some time now. If not, that would add about $1,250 per lot on the average 75-foot lot at Mountain View Meadows. Number 2 would be the widening of streets by 2 feet per figure 5-1A in the transportation standard details. In addition to creating significantly more dangerous local streets, that would add about $1,700 to a 75-foot lot in construction cost and loss of square footage of the lot. I think it would actually weaken the city's situation for long-term fiscal stability to some extent, if I'm correct, it's going to reduce the amount of square footage of lots that are taxable and increase the amount of street that needs to be maintained also. The current 34-foot local street width standard has been working well at Mountain View Meadows, and I believe it's in the purview of the commission to retain the current standard, which is all we're really asking for. The third one is the water service lines from the main in the street over to the lots, and neither the current nor standards nor the draft standards specifically allow HDPE pipe, which is the high density polyethylene pipe, which has evolved greatly over recent years. And this is the state-of-the-art polyethylene pipe, which has numerous physical advantages over copper pipe, while costing, as has been noted, about $300 less per lot. It is the preferred water service line in both Missoula and Billings. These 3 items all add up to about $3,250 per my analysis of direct cost per lot. And with you have to realize that the developer and the builder are both going to have carrying costs, interest, commissions, overhead, a lot of costs that are going to add to that. And so I believe that the range is $5,000 to $7,000 at Mountain View Meadows on this average 75-foot lot. And for example, for the our Redeemers project, which is a little more dense, I think they're going to end up with about $3,500 to $5,000 per living unit increased cost from these things. And in summary, I would ask that you fix these 3 items and also look at some of the other issues that have been, I think, identified by engineers, architects, MTAC advisory board, et cetera. And I think, as we all know, we are in the middle of a housing crisis, and the need to look for ways to maintain and reduce housing costs, housing affordability at all levels is key to Helena's economic future, and also and well-being. And to Commissioner Reed's comment, I think I agree that when things are changed, there should be some kind of cost benefit analysis done at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on this?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Greg Worth. I'm a member of the Non-Motorized Travel Advisory Council. At our last couple of meetings, we have requested and are awaiting staff to explain the changes to the engineering standards. The changes that are proposed are very vehicular centric and really do not conform to the context sensitive and livability principles that are identified in the LRTP or the complete street policy. One Other municipalities have moved not toward a transportation, but calling it mobility for a more inclusive term. I mean, that should be, was my first comment is the chapter should be renamed. If we're doing, widening streets, making intersections larger, it really does discriminate against transportation users that are not in cars. Getting back to the sustainability portion, as we look at updating the LRTP, I would like to see what other communities and states have adopted, which is a commuter travel reduction plan to reduce vehicle mile travels, to kind of mesh the different principles that we have. And of course, we have wider streets for cars. It does not promote non-motorized travel. So I would request that the adoption of the engineering standards be postponed until MTAC can be fully integrated. And I'd also, as the board chair of Habitat for Humanity, I'd also echo the comments that the proposed changes, will make housing more expensive, specifically the Our Redeemer Church project that Habitat for Humanity is looking to be a part of. By making them expensive, difficult, it's going to put Helena in an economic development disadvantage position. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Word. Do you have any others? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners and staff for allowing me the opportunity to comment. My name is Rebecca Ryland. I'm the Director of Design at Mountain View Meadows. And I'm also on the board for the Homeowners Association at Mountain View Meadows. My concern today is the widening of the local streets. We would like to avoid having the kinds of issues that Winnie has and other residential areas in the community. We know that you care about safety of the citizens. We definitely care about the safety of the residents at Mountain View Meadows. We have implemented some traffic calming opportunities within our residential communities, but we still have issues with speeding on any of the areas that are wider, such as what is in front of our office, which is South Alice Street. And cars just speed down that street, even though we have put in bulb outs. It's helped calm it, but not to the extent that it needs to be. So when you then take the residential streets and widen them to more in line with what we've seen on Winnie and on South Alice Street, that the traffic is going to increase in speed. It puts our walkers at risk. It puts at risk anyone getting out of their car to get their mail. It puts at risk the people who are delivering things at the residence. It puts at risk our children walking home from school, the elderly walking down the sidewalks and wanting to cross the street. It will increase speed. I'm sure all of you, because you do care about this issue, have looked at the research and know that increase in speed of traffic of motorized vehicles decreases the safety of those who are not using motorized vehicles for transportation within their residential communities. I do implore that you look at this functionality wise. There have been no issues in our residential neighborhoods for both the commuters and as well as emergency vehicles. There have been no issues. Accessibility is good. We want to protect our residents who are not using our streets and our complete streets for just motorized traffic. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any public comments? All right, thanks. We are moving along to Director Kanaka, you're on this agenda item. Are you going to be speaking?
Mayor and Commission, only if the Mayor and Commission has questions for me. Myself.
Process question.
Okay, go ahead.
So adoption of these standards was it come up Monday?
Mayor, Commissioner, no. We knew that there needed to be further discussion by the commission and the staff. We, in talking with the director, thought we'd kind of get a sense of your discussion here tonight and if there are further discussions that need to occur. So we haven't set an actual time frame to bring it forward at the official commission. So
Okay, so do you feel like you've gotten enough feedback from us today, or how do we, if we have more feedback, how do we get that feedback?
you know, my recommendation would be let's sit on it for a week or two and bring it back to see if there are further questions from the commission. Not only relative to any comments that you heard, but also if you have further questions on why the proposed designs are what they are relative to the street width and fire codes and engineering codes and because right now they're different. And so I think that if we bring it back in an agenda and not do the overview, but say, okay, here it is. Are there any further questions? And then I think we would have a better feel for that after it's had a chance to digest a little bit.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Just one clarified question. So from what I understand here, we've clarified of all of the public comment that we've received. We've clarified all of it except for the two pieces that are still in disagreement with the public comment, and where the standards actually are would be the street width and the copper pipes, and that's it, right?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, so if we were able to get further explanation on those two things, why we are recommending the change, that would be helpful at our next meeting. So,
Commissioner Mayor, that's good advice. We'll plan on it.
Thank you. Okay, moving along, department reports. New city capital improvement plan, budget and revenue officer, Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and Commission. I think this is on page 204, I think in your guys' binders.
Of nearly 1,000.
Yeah, of 976. So we as a city have been working together with the department heads and as a finance department to come up with a template or capital improvement plan template to better explain to the commission and the mayor what the department's projects are over a 5-year period. We had through some communication in the leadership meeting and some one-on-one meetings with the city manager, finance, and the department heads. We came up with this template, and I'll give an example shortly after this to show what this is gonna look like when it's completed. So we decided on the terms of major capital, minor capital. Doesn't make it any less important. It still needs to be completed. We classified anything major capital as anything over $80,000. And I think that's the policy for items that have to go out to a public bid process is anything over $80,000. So that's why we classified that as a major project. And then and then down low, you can see this is an Excel template, and it'll pull in the information from other tabs and give us a total at the bottom. So you can see the total capital project plan for each of the fiscal years, and then the 5-year total and what each department is planning on trying to do. This is a living and breathing document. So what I show you a month from now can change on a day-to-day basis. The second tab is the same as the first. It just says minor capital. So anything you see under here ranges from $5,000 to $79,999. And then the third tab is your vehicle and equipment. And so that's where all the departments will put their vehicle and equipment plan. What I got for you guys now is this is a completed one. I'll zoom in a little bit. I just want to remind everybody that this is a rough guesstimate on what these numbers or projects will be. I just wanted to give a template on what it would look like when it's completed. We used the water fund, for example. And so you can see anything that they have plan that's over $80,000 and what they plan or want to complete over the next 5 fiscal years. And then as you go down, you can see how it's pulling in information from the minor capital tab and the vehicle tab to show their total expense costs or their capital costs over the next 5 years. It wasn't on the template, but this is something for enterprise funds or special revenue funds that they can do. That they can complete and show the commission what their current process looks like. And we wanted to really focus on the highlighted red area right there. This is based off of, again, these are complete speculation numbers as far, but we wanted to give an example of what it would look like after revenue and operating expenses come out and their capital plan, what actually can remain funded or gets pushed off to the next fiscal year or just keeps getting pushed down the side, like you stated earlier, stuff getting put to the back burner to complete other things. There is a unfunded capital aspect in almost all funds, I think. If we did some research about that, and this helps everyone see that and understand that. Yeah, we can fund certain projects and get them done within a certain fiscal year, but there's some that we can't. And then we have an area built in that we can talk about during the budget review process that says if we raised our rates 3%, we can fund X amount of capital, or to be complete to fund all capital for this fiscal year, we can if we raised our rates 10%, we can fund all that stuff. So this is just something that we are working on. Like I said, it's a living, breathing document, and it can change on a day-to-day basis depending on the needs of the city and the community and the department needs as well.
Thank you, are you done, Mr.
Smith, yeah.
Smith?
Yeah, I'm done.
Go ahead, Manager.
Thank you,
Burton.
Mayor. So this is a refinement off of last year's budget and the capital plan that we went through. I thank Zach for his work. He's worked with all the department heads to collaborate on this. I think it's going to be a very valuable tool as you move forward because everything's going to be consistent. All those numbers and the capital is different, but the approach and process will be consistent. And when you do get to a point where you're considering, what's the top priority and where would I put new money if we had some, then you'll have that graph there that'll show if we raise the rates 2%, here's what we can accomplish. If it's 3%, here's what we can accomplish, and you can do that across the enterprise. So really, I think Zach's done a great job in coordinating with the directors. And it's really just setting the stage for the next budget process so that it'll be more information, more uniform and predictable as you guys continue to walk down that road.
Thank you, sir. Comments or questions from the commission?
Mayor, first, Mr. Smith, thank you. I've been on the commission now for 3 years, and this is the first time that I think we will ever have an actual clear picture as to what our full capital needs are and what the impact looks like on the budget. And I only know the 3 years of it, so I'm sure it is more than that. One thing that I think might be helpful, and this maybe just food for thought as we start heading into budget season. If we could kind of keep a running list on the side of those projects that fall into the unfunded capital category, and then the years that they, as we move forward, like the years that they were put on this schedule. Because one thing that I've run into the last few budgets that I've been through is that we'll hear that something has been, needed to get done for so many years, but then we don't necessarily have kind of the historical knowledge to tell us when it got added or why it got added. And then I think it sometimes falls off and then it comes back on. And so if we could just maybe have that documented somewhere, just so we have a firm idea of, if we're not funding something for whatever reason, it's not forgotten about when future commissions start going through these.
Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Lane.
Go ahead.
Kind of the dovetail off your comment or question. Years ago, I was an administrator with the city, and I can remember engaging with the finance director at the time, and when as a department head, when we were in the development of an individual year's capital needs from the point of view of our various departments, I would go sit with the finance director, and he had a spreadsheet that went back and it went forward a long way. So I think that would speak to your, the any historical concerns you have in either direction, whether it's in the past or in the future. And it was a pretty impressive document. And it was presented on the wall in front of you. So I don't know whether that's still, that opportunity to see all that is still out there, but I would encourage you. Yeah.
You got a whole set of new people, my friend.
Good thing we're getting that fancy new ERP.
Yeah.
It'll be a lot easier with that ERP.
Danielson?
Mayor, Commissioner Logan, each of the departments has a very detailed supporting documentation for all of their capital that projects out, several years. The problem with presenting that is that, beyond 5 years, things just change. But there is each department has a comprehensive list of their long-term capital needs that they maintain themselves. And we can certainly go into that detail, but I think that what we're presenting here, a 5-year outlook is probably a more honed in, realistic view of, what the priorities are over the next 5 years for capital purposes.
Mr. Mayor, just briefly, I was not necessarily advocating for us getting that level, but I would say that an individual commissioner, wanted to dive that deep, that opportunity is out there.
We certainly have that detail if any commissioner wanted to have that chat with me. Excel spreadsheets.
And I would just add that if we want to go beyond 5 years and talk 20, we have the ability to do that as well. And if, us in this room are thinking 20 or 30 years out, then nobody else is. The demise of the spreadsheet was that only one person knew how to upkeep it.
Sure.
It was a lot of information, but I think we've got just as good information today.
Sure.
Hopefully it'll be organized and more useful.
Thanks.
All right. Any other comments? Return to the public. Any public comments on this topic? Director Danielson, is your presentation done?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna have Zach help me with sharing this presentation onto the screen here. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. So good evening again, and I'm pleased to be able to present this 6-month financial update to the commission and to the residents of Helena with the help that I've had from Zach Smith, our budget and revenue officer, in pulling together the information. This presents data that has been updated through the end of December. There have been obviously, further collections and expenses since then, but this gives a good snapshot in time of where we're at compared to our budget. So just to recap our fiscal 23 budget, we adopted 106 million and 113 in revenue and 113 million in adopted appropriations, using excess reserves across all of the funds of about $6.9 million. In the general fund, we projected to spend excess reserves in amount of $1.2 million, and that represents a contribution of about $744,000 for general capital that the commission prioritized. $400,000 over to the Law and Justice Center for necessary repairs at that facility. $50,000 for city manager recruitment, and then about $8,200 in some miscellaneous other grant deficiencies that we had in that fund. For the special revenue funds, their revenue over expected expenses of a shortfall of $9.9 million from current year revenue is primarily due to the ARPA funding. So about $8.5 million of that was sitting in a special revenue fund for ARPAs, that the money came in the prior year and was expected to be spent in fiscal 23. So that makes up most of that, along with some other miscellaneous spending throughout some of the special revenue funds that are capital related, that they would be using the reserves for capital. And in the enterprise funds, they weren't expected to go and in a grand total across the funds, expected to dip into the reserves, but actually use their current year revenue for that. Next slide. So we brought some amendments to the commission for both revenue and expenditures, and this is just a snapshot of the amendments that we have adopted to date for the fiscal year 23 budget. If you'll recall, we had quite a few carryover adjustments this year, and most of that was representative in expenditures. But in revenue, we brought an amendment of $1.6 million in SRF funding for the wastewater projects. Some funding that was also distributed through ARPA decisions from the commission, and of that, the $75,000 in streets represents the Henderson Breach study. In facilities, the $94,000 represented the Grant Street Theater and network tower funding. For public safety, that's the computer-aided design and RMS system that both the city and the county are going in on together. For open space, that represents some grant funding that they received. The fire safety levy, that's the $200,000 of ARPA funding preliminarily dedicated to the wildland fire truck. General capital, that was $500,000 for the large ERP system that we're redoing across the city. About $479,000 in HVAC funding for the Civic Center, and $120,000 for Centennial Trail improvements. The transfer station, they had a budget amendment to their revenue for their solid waste master plan. And the and then also for the 6250 and the this particular building was revenue for the records room wall that was adjusted. So we got some funding adjustment and a budget adjustment for the records room wall that went up just across the way here. And the Law and Justice Center, it was $1,000 for that ADA grant for the wheelchair charging station, and $69,000 that was rededicated for the second floor remodel over at the Law and Justice Center, making up almost $4 million in revenue amendments to the total revenue budget for the city. In this slide, it's just a capture of a 5-year trend from 2019 to what we had in 2019 actuals, also demonstrating the fiscal 23 adopted budget, what it is amended to as of this date, and what we have selected so far. On average, in total, throughout the entire city, we've collected about 43% of our budgeted revenue, but you can see that, taxes and assessments, I've made notes there and those come in pretty large chunks, some in December and another big chunk in January. And then we have a pretty large distribution that comes to us in May and June that will make up the rest of that funding. So we had about $1.2 million received in addition for taxes in January, and about $2.1 million in additional assessment revenue that was received in January that aren't reflective in these numbers. Interest revenue is exceeding our very conservative projections because at the time we developed our budget, treasury rates were extremely low. The last I looked on the Montana Board of Investment site, it was a 3.98% yield. So pretty different from now on even a year ago of what treasury rates are bringing in for interest revenue. So that's some welcome additional revenue in each of the funds. The other financing line item, I noted that just represents timing issues with debt service, contributions, rents, and settlements that are collected throughout the year, and as well as a kind of a timing issue with intergovernmental revenue. A large portion of that is our state entitlement revenue that comes quarterly, and it's not that second quarter isn't reflected in this number too. So I think we're pretty much on target with our revenue collections for the year. As I said, a lot of it is just timing of when we receive the revenue, and by the time we put this report together, it just hasn't been received and it's flowed into January. This is just another snapshot of our revenue collections since 2019. I did a quick calculation and just our amended budget from 2019. That's about a 44% increase in our revenue budgeted revenue from that time frame. So that's a pretty significant jump, but our costs are the same. Next slide, please. This is another demonstration of the collections toward our total citywide revenue budget. Again, taxes and assessments, we had those large receipts in January, and other financing you can see is the other kind of disparity that's primarily due to timing on collecting that revenue. This slide just isolates the general fund revenue collections. We're across the entire general fund, about 48.6% of revenue collected, which is pretty much on target. Again, we have a large tax revenues in the general fund that were collected in January. Again, transfers in are a little bit lower, but they reflect the fire levy fund transferring money over to the general fund to support 6 firefighters. That was what that levy represented, and also some other transfers that are grant related or insurance related. Intergovernmental revenue represents that state entitlement revenue and some grants, and other financing represents Case Kid Foundation contributions to the city to support that program, some miscellaneous other revenue and sales of fixed assets. And charges for services are fine, well on target. One thing to note for next year for charges for services is that the Fort Harrison contract for the city that supports the fire services, we did receive an extended quarter with them, but we may not receive that fourth quarter with them. They may terminate that service with us and move to another service provider for those services. And I think the assistant chief can speak more to that if you have any questions on that. But that revenue at this point in time may or may not happen, and will be a pretty big loss to the general fund to support fire services. Next slide. This is a snapshot of our special revenue funds and revenue collected. Overall, about 48% collected so far. Again, we have taxes and assessments like the streets fund, have their street maintenance assessments. They had big distribution come in January. Intergovernmental revenue for special funds primarily represents gas tax, SSD funding from the county. So when they get their tax revenue, then they forward it to us. So there's a little bit of delay of when they collect that and send it over to us. We also have funding for our 911 program for the county and East Helena, and representative of intergovernmental revenue and some grant revenue. And then the internal service revenue represents primarily facility maintenance, and operating collections into that special revenue fund from other funds from the city. Excellent. In the enterprise funds, for their revenue collections, they're on target with their charges. This is mostly our charges for water and wastewater services, solid waste, those types of things. Intergovernmental revenue represents grants, county contributions for transfer station and recycling, transit revenue, which is collected from the state, the county, Helena, and other grants. And other financing is representative of rents collected for the Law and Justice Center and the CCAB building, internal roll-off charges for solid waste, and other charges for mail and postage. And it also represents, it's a pretty big chunk of the funding that the general fund sent over to the water fund for the 1.8 million for the ARPA project.
Director Danielson,
Yes,
would you please pull the mic closer to you?
yes, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Usually I don't have problems.
No,
with
I'm
people
fine
hearing
with
me.
you. It's just that the people online are,
Thank you.
so.
Okay, so the next slide is we're moving to expenditures. You can see that this is broken out by the type of fund, general, special revenue, enterprise. And you can see where those large capital functions are in the special revenue funds, the enterprise funds, and our general capital and parks capital funds. It looks like our expenditures, haven't happened, but as capital goes, they're just kind of wrapping up their capital season. And they won't ramp up again until the spring. So a lot of that is just a timing issue of when they start their capital projects. So I don't expect too big of a issue with that. This next slide, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's our amendments to our expenditures. If you recall, we had a carryover of over $30 million this year that was brought to the commission. And then most of these budget adjustments are representative of ARPA distributions and some grant funds that were received, such as the $500,000 grant for the electric sweeper that we got that would have gone into the streets fund. The next slide is just another capture of our expenses to date compared to budget. And the next slide kind of puts that a little bit more in perspective, where you can see that most of that's related to contracted services and capital outlay. And again, those are all very seasonal capital related items that we expect to ramp up this spring and come more into line with what we've budgeted for those items. If I break it down into expense type, you can again see that the big variance is really that we haven't expended so far is in capital, and then the intracity charges, which is where one fund will charge another fund. I know that the IBS system that they have for the inventory system to charge out is a little bit of a delay in getting the funding and the transfers over to finance to make those adjustments. So that's why that's a little low. And then purchase services again and capital outlay represent timing, seasonal, project related. Oh, and in the contracted services, we still have about 6.7 million in that special revenue fund that was appropriated at the time that we created the budget, but we've already made transfers from, as kind of an accounting function that we brought to the commission as a budget amendment to take that from the 290 fund over to the general fund. So that makes up a little bit of the differences. And looking at our personnel costs for the city, we're pretty much on target where we need to be, but there are some departments that are seeing some variances in their personnel costs, and that's primarily related to health insurance. So when we moved from the model that we were using, budget, and I'll go into this a little bit more in the next couple of slides, but when we went to a model of budgeting a dollar amount per employee, we did estimate an increase on that, but we had no way of knowing at that time, how the plan would be impacted by employees, like changing from one plan to another. And so that did impact some funds or some departments where I was actually one of them. I went from a lower plan to a richer plan. And of course, that costed the city more. And I think that happened, a lot of that happened throughout the city, which created a larger impact than what we were expecting when we were putting our estimates together for that. And so we will be incorporating that into our fiscal 24 budget. Other funds also that it's impacted, but I don't know that they'll need an amendment, but we're watching them just to make sure that we don't have to might bring an amendment for these funds for the health insurance costs. Just looking at overtime, total overtime for the city was budgeted at $714,500. We've used about 56% of that. One of the biggest users of overtime in the city is the fire department. And that's primarily due to the vacancies they've had, and I'm gonna pinpoint you, but also because they've had staff on leave. And when they have staff on leave, that they don't have the depth of their fire department to draw upon. And so that creates a lot of overtime issues with the other employees. And our assistant chief is here if you have any other questions about that.
Can we ask? Can we ask the question now? You want us to wait?
You can ask a question now, yes, I can get through the entire presentation, or you can interject at this point.
Okay, I just want to know about the contract with the VA.
So when we entered into that contract, Mary Commissioner, sorry.
Yeah, you can pull that mic. Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioners, when we negotiated that contract, I think it's been about 1.5 years now, 2 years. They wanted to do it quarterly. It's with the Department of Military Affairs. And there were certain parameters that they wanted, certain parameters that we wanted for services provided. And they simply just wanted a quarterly contract. The reason we were able to have that contract is the VA was previously contracting services to the Fort Harrison property. And something in their rule book or a federal law or something was not allowing them, or they found that they were non-compliant with their own rules. So they had to look for a secondary provider, which was us. Currently, I think they know something, it's about $317,000 a year. And I think currently they're not liking spending that money so much probably. And they're trying to come up with some kind of intergovernmental agreement back with the VA to trade services rather than have a monetary exchange, is what we're understanding at this point. So
Mayor, I would just add that the notification that we received was in compliance with the contract.
yes,
But it was certainly a surprise. And that I'm working with our office right now to set up a meeting with myself and the adjutant general and chief to see if we can better understand what their concerns and what their long-term goals are.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, so how's that getting, the loss of that revenue gonna impact your operation?
I think Mayor and Commissioners, I think the city manager probably understands that as well as anybody, that it's a pretty big hit, being that as every budget, most of the budget goes towards personnel costs, and we're very lean on the operational side. So as a percentage of our overall budget, $317,000 is a very significant hit as we've adjusted over the last couple of years with general fund contributions and whatnot.
So how do you see it impacting daily operations or? Yeah.
Well,
Or I could, yeah.
Mayor and Commissioners. I think it's too early to tell. We're certainly doing some analysis on that. But what we do know is that's a big hit. Yep. I think that prompts a good sit down with the attorney or with the adjutant general if we can get his time. And then we go into a new budget. And so we'll have to have all of this information in front of us as we come back and look at potential impacts or how to mitigate them.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks.
And thank you.
You have the floor, Director Danielson.
Thank you, Mayor. So just other issues with the personnel, and Director McMahon can probably speak to this if you have questions, but we've had a lot of difficult recruiting certain positions, one being the accountant, engineers, transit operators, public safety telecommuters, planners, equipment operators, and it's really impacted operations, and the demand for those services have not gone away. And they're going up, and I know that in engineering, they had a huge backlog in there, and in community development, there's a huge backlog of trying to keep up with the service demands. And so our human resources director has been very, very helpful in developing new and different ways to try to recruit personnel into the city. However, that's also, comes with a cost. So her original recruitment estimate was $10,000, and I expected it'll be about 3 times that. And that does not include the city manager recruitment. So definitely keeping an eye on that. And at Director McMahon, can you speak to how many vacancies we have now? I hate to put her on the spot there.
Just like you hate to put the assistant fire.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We have about 30 vacancies right now. Some are recurring that we've tried to recruit for, just are unable to fill. Engineers, I think we have 3 full-time vacancies that we've been recruiting for years, quite frankly. Planners, we have 3 vacancies in community development right now. We've been recruiting for months and months.
I see Sharon's always here. We can.
She's priceless. So all in total, we have about 30 vacancies right now in different stages of, recruitment cycles. Some have not actively pursued recruitments, others have. So that's the total of our 374 FTE.
Yes.
Director, can you talk about our approach relative to the outliers in
For-
market-based pay plan and our approach to dealing with some of this?
Yeah, so Mayor and Commissioners, we have received preliminary market wage data from our market study. And we're starting to identify the areas where the positions where we really are not competitive. And so through some data analysis that I'm currently doing, we'll bring a proposal forward to the finance director and the city manager here probably early next week. But for engineers, accountants, and our transit operators, our bus drivers, we have learned through that data that we are indeed pretty low paid, and which might explain some of the reason why we're not able to recruit. So what we are doing is we're urgently moving and reclassifying those pay grades. And upon the city manager's approval, we'll start recruiting at a higher pay rate for those 3 categories of employees. Hopefully that'll garner some more success for us.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Director Anderson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna, in light of the time, I'm gonna try to speed through the rest of this presentation for you.
Welcome remark.
This next slide is just, as I spoke to earlier, we're looking at the changes in the benefit cost per employee. I'm still waiting on to meet with Director McMahon, and her staff have done a little bit more analysis on the average cost per employee for health benefits, but my preliminary estimate, we had budgeted 1,073 per employee, and it's looking like it's right around 1,115 per employee right now, which is, if you take that and multiply that by the number of staff that we budget benefits for, that's about $187,000 increase to our health benefits than what we had originally projected. And that doesn't take into account any new employees that would be added or any new premium increases that MMIA might issue it. So we'll be shoring up that information as we go through the budget process. But this year it did create quite of an impact to the fund balance and the health insurance fund to be able to afford those health insurance increases. And I think it was definitely a good a good move for the city for recruitment and retention. It was just, we kind of missed the mark with our estimate. The next slides are just kind of going over a little bit of what I've already spoke to as far as our costs. I think we're pretty much on target. Personnel services at that bottom line is primarily due to vacancies throughout the city of why we haven't hit the mark of where we would normally be at this time of the year. We also have, some seasonal staff that'll be gearing up in the spring that'll bring us more in line with our personnel budgets. And then this is just breaking it down into the special revenue and enterprise funds. And I'm going to let you just skip to the areas to watch. Just as I indicated, we're looking at health insurance costs, general recruitment costs, inflation adjustments for capital and operating expenditures have impacted, most of our departments. The equipment is, they'll have estimated $50,000 and now it's $75,000. And so those changes and impacts are happening. And then we're working with the Civic Center on looking at their costs analysis, and we'll be bringing some information to the commission related to their rates. And I'm working with Director Smith. I was thinking of this Smith, but you're Smith. I'm working with Director Smith and his operations manager at the Civic Center to have a little bit of closer budget analysis on his fund, and then the ever ending second floor remodel over at the Law and Justice Center that we have conversations about, and then facility improvements here in this. So at this point, that ends my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Danielson. Comments or questions from the commission?
One question. I didn't see a specific number in here, but I might have missed it. You noted that our vacancy savings made up for the increases in our healthcare benefits. Do we know what the dollar amount is for vacancy savings?
I haven't done that analysis, no.
Okay.
We've had, I mean, the engineering department is empty pretty much. And the planning department is empty. I've had vacancies and it's just been a lot of vacancies in the general fund.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any public comments on this item? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Oh. Yeah. So, the next item here is ARPA and general fund saving update. Amanda, I just want to remind you of our little discussion.
Duly noted, Mayor.
No pressure.
Keep it on the short side. My presentation up here. All right.
While she's giving a presentation, I say something fast.
Please.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. If possible, it seems that this item on the agenda seems to be the last one repeatedly on meetings that are going really long. So if going forward, if we could either put it first or maybe weight agendas that have this discussion differently, because I know we have a lot of people who come and sit online, and I inevitably have to run at 5:30 and hop back online. And I know this is an item of huge interest. So if we could have this item either be alone or on a lighter agenda, I would be grateful, because again, I know we have a lot of people who are super interested. So thank you.
Julie noted.
Here.
Commissioner.
I agree. Yep.
Okay. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. And I do appreciate those that have shown up today to give public comment. I know it's been a long agenda and not without density in our last few items, but I'm going to make it quick, and I'm going to skip some slides and try and do my best to make this go a little bit quicker. So Director Danielson went through the internal allocations that we have made to date in her last presentation, so I'm not going to do that. What is important to note is the remaining balance that we have right now for allocation related to general fund savings that the city has, which is about $2.8 million. In the last week or so, there have been some additional internal requests that have come to light. There are 3 that we're going to walk through with you today. And I'm going to ask, first of all, Troy Sampson to go through some additional changes and internal requests related to the Law and Justice Center second floor remodel. If you'd like to take over, Troy.
Thanks, Amanda. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. At our January 19th building board meeting, there was discussion on trying to infuse some funds. The county came to us and asked if we would be interested in infusing funds into the joint facilities capital fund. So when we had our FY24 capital projects prioritized, they spoke that, you know, they were interested in potentially giving some ARPA funding if the city was interested also. And so the list you see in front of you are the 3 major capital items for the Law and Justice Center, a couple minor capital, and then the city county building has about $66,000 worth of capital. So the ask is, in total, it was a $469,000 request. And if we divide that between the city and the county evenly, it would be about $234,500 to share in that project.
So, Mayor, that's brand new. It was brought forward by the county and just brings it forward as a consideration based upon the county's request.
Thank you. Are you done, Mr. Sampson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The next internal request comes from the Parks and Recreation Department. Director Smith can provide some information on this. I do apologize. The next 2 slides are without estimated costs. We didn't have those last week as we were putting together the agenda. Any future discussion related to these items, we'll make sure that that is included in the packet. Director Smith.
All right. Mr. Mayor, Commission. City staff, with the help of Director Sampson. Thank you, Troy, and our park superintendent, Craig Marr, have met with an architect to discuss preliminary plans and cost estimates to do a study for potential upgrades of the infrastructure, which would include, you know, making the restrooms ADA accessible and potential expansion as well. We received a quote from a local architect, and it's going to cost approximately $15,000 to have the study done. To evaluate the current situation and future potential of the warming house at Memorial Park. That is all I have.
Thank you, Director.
Any questions?
The next internal request comes from the fire department, and this is a little bit more complicated.
There was a reason he was here.
It's a little more complicated in that for the public's information, we have already allocated $200,000 through the ARPA funds for replacement of the type 6 fire apparatus that caught fire and had to be replaced. The insurance claim has been settled, and so there's information related to that that our assistant chief will provide.
Yes, Mayor and Commission, thank you. I will be brief, hopefully. Yes, our fire truck did catch fire and it was totaled. It was an aging piece of apparatus that we did want to replace, but we didn't want to do it in this manner. We found, as trying to be good stewards with the community's money, we found the best path forward and the most cost-effective way was to utilize the insurance company's money. And they did an evaluation to put a brand new chassis underneath that box. That cost from the insurance company was $58,488, which we paid and have been reimbursed so far. Our ask on that will be $10,000 for the deductible. And with that, since we have an opportunity to essentially get a brand new wildland truck out of this issue or concern, The slide-in unit was very old in it, which is the pump and the water tank. I recently got a quote today and I've been working with our vendor that's doing the repurposing of the truck, the chassis. We're gonna be sitting around 37,000 additional dollars. So out of that 200,000, we're looking to really spend about 47,000. And yes, and we really will have a 10 to 15 year, 10 to 12 year truck out of this deal, barring no accident, injury, adverse condition.
Mayor,
Please.
so. Those are good numbers, but we also would like concurrence if you're agreeable to that, which is different than the whole brand new truck.
Right.
Then we'll proceed.
Then we'll what?
Proceed. with
Yes, absolutely.
The acquisition, if you're okay.
Well, I knew your answer already. so. If I'm wrong, you tell me I'm wrong.
You got it. Read it
Okay.
like a book.
Any other comments from the, on this topic, comments also from the commission?
I'm very on board with that.
I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Oh, I thought you said no.
No.
Oh, okay. Continue, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, so provided there's consensus to move forward on that lower purchase, the rest of that funding would go back into our coffers. Of course, we do not have that information, so my numbers are not going to reflect that. For sake of time, we'll skip the review. Needless to say, we've been discussing this for a very long time, both internally and externally. And we're now at the point where we are able to discuss the applications that have come in for our external funding. I want to say thank you on behalf of the internal committee that did the initial screening for staff. Thank you to the different organizations that participated in this particular step. We received some incredible applications, as you can see. A lot of work went into those applications. This is the adjusted requests that have come in. So the numbers that were initially brought forward by organizations through the LOI process are crossed out. The new numbers are included below. These top 7 projects were brought by the City Commission during past commission meetings, and that included the Our Redeemers project, the facility acquisition from Family Promise, the Food Share Community Food Resource Center, improvements, enhancements to the Warren Nelson Stadium that was brought by Carroll College, request for a sustainability study through the Helena Regional Sports Association, so a request for mobile hygiene units and meal prep units from the United Way, and wildfire risk assessment and education request from Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group. As you can see, there were 3 that were adjusted. The Warren Nelson Stadium initial request to the LOI was for $1 million. That was adjusted through the application to $700,000. The sustainability study from the Helena Regional Sports Authority went down slightly from $70,000 to $64,000. And the Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group request went up from $120,000 to $140,000. Just a quick reminder of the priorities that the commission set as we were going through these applications. The priority number 1 was for programs and projects that benefited vulnerable populations. Priority number 2, public health and safety projects. Priority number 3, programs and projects that improve the quality of life. And priority number 4 was increased economic development to the Helena area. So the initial staff review, which the committee included myself, Director Danielson, Deputy Director Chris Cooey of Transportation Systems, and Senior Planner Ellie Ray. We worked to create a rubric to take a look at quantifying some very complicated and very diverse applications. The screening rubric was set up from 0 to 10 in terms of quality points. 0 being that this quality was not demonstrated, 10 being that it exceeded. And these were the criteria that we worked through. Whether or not there was a contingency in place, we decided that that didn't need a quality rather than just a yes and no answer, so that the commission was aware of whether or not there was funding, additional funding that was available for those projects. And also we did an initial screening to make sure that there are proper management and financial controls in place to be able to handle this money at the organization level. Again, we didn't provide a quality standpoint from our assessment for those. Instead, we decided to include that as a yes or no question as information for the commission. So the other criteria that we decided to look through is project readiness, feasibility, and plan, and then alignment with your 4 priorities. And I will note that we did not require that multiple priorities were met by each application. However, there were some that met all 4, and so we had to create a way to analyze the quality of how those projects were aligning with 4 priorities. The long-term sustainability of the project, the ability to provide matching funds and what that ratio would look like, and then a somewhat nebulous, but often spoke about at the commission level criteria, which was providing transformational impacts to our community. I won't go through the whole list as you have this in your packet, but this was how that committee ended up quantifying those particular criteria based on the applications. There were 2 clear top projects according to the group, that being the Helena Food Share and Food Resource Center and the Rocky Mountain Development Council Our Redeemers Housing Project. I will say though that, and you'll see this in the notes that I included from the committee, that all these projects have merit and warranted serious consideration. So I do hope you had a chance to take a look at the full applications. So I appreciate that I went through that lightning speed, but the point that we're at this time is to get a sense from you, the commission, what you would like in terms of next steps, if there's additional information that you need, or if you're ready to move forward with allocations.
Thank you, Ms. Otis. Comments or questions from the commission? Yes, oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
So I didn't know exactly what to expect here for this afternoon's meeting in terms of, direction from us. I went through and I tended to, I weighted the ones that I thought should move forward in the first 2 priorities, those benefiting vulnerable populations in public health and safety. So I selected 3, right or wrong. I don't know if you need to know those right now, but I guess my top one was the Our Redeemers Lutheran Church project. I do have some questions that I think it might benefit us to hear from you about it. That is, we're looking, their proposal, if I understand it, is the purchase of the land, 2.4 million. So that's a cost that will be borne by our funding, but obviously it's a development. So I guess I'd be interested in other costs associated with the city in the future as this development moves forward. That's a pretty broad question, but then, we're also looking at a development that is inside a neighborhood. And so I don't think we've really engaged the public yet as far as this proposed development goes. And so, those raise questions for me about this, but I think we clearly hear from the community about the need for help. And this certainly is a project that will address that need. So it's a significant interest to me.
The second I felt was Family Promise. I thought it was a good program that helped the unsheltered population. And so I was looking at hoping that that would move forward. And then the third was, and this, as you can imagine, Mr. Mayor, as you can imagine, was Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group's proposal. You know, I spent all my professional career in the fire department, worked my way through the ranks. The higher up in the ranks that I got, the more clear it became that the most significant community risk that we have is wildfire. That's a serious potential is wildfire. And one of the things that's clear is I don't know that the public understands that. And this program seeks to address it both in terms of mitigation and education. Because I think one of the cheapest ways that we can protect our citizens relative to wildfire is to teach them their responsibility in knowing what to do. And particularly evacuation, huge piece. And so those are the three that I would like to see move forward at this point. I also, we all received an email from a citizen about his concerns with one of the projects. At the tail end of that, he said, why aren't you considering some of this ARPA funding? And this will relate to your very first comment this afternoon. Why aren't we considering ARPA funding for a renewable energy project? I guess in the city of Helena, that is sort of limited to solar, you know, a solar project on one of our many buildings. And so I don't know, maybe moving forward, we might, obviously, we're not gonna come to concrete decisions tonight, but maybe that's something that I know that there are projects that have been looked at in the past, and maybe it'd be worth looking at there. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks. And I know this is not the meeting for heavy decision making. This was informational as far as we were concerned with an update from Ms. Opitz. And talking about that, we do have the solar program. If the community is not using it, we can use it. Go ahead, Commissioner.
One thing I had to chuckle with the additional internal requests with the county's ask. And one thing that I would, which is fine, I mean, we jointly own the building. We need to make the upgrades. I have no qualms with that. What I would ask though is I would be interested in having a discussion with the county. We've talked about this a little bit before. Every single project outside of internal requests has a very direct impact on the county and county residents as well. And also everyone who lives in the city are county residents. I think we shall remember that.
Yeah.
I really would be interested to find out where they might be able to or willing to participate in funding some of these projects. I know we haven't had a chance to have a joint meeting for a little while, but I think if we can next week, is it next week?
Yeah.
I think if we can maybe have that conversation, because for example, the United Way project, a lot of the emergent disasters that they're responding to with a vehicle like this will be county emergencies,
right.
Whether it's flooding, fire, whatever. A lot of that does actually occur in the county. So I think that if we can really maximize our resources to achieve, you know, maybe not having to eliminate as many projects, I think that would be really beneficial and an opportunity for us to work collaboratively with the county folks.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Mayor, I agree with the Law and Justice Center. We're doing some cost sharing there. I think there's some innovative ways to be able to match or meet some of the needs here on this list. I do know that from the folks I talked to, housing is critical. We're at a crisis right now when it comes to whether it's affordable workforce housing, et cetera, housing of any kind. In the way that the city doesn't build housing, but we can help through permitting infrastructure and this project. And so for me, like Commissioner Logan, I think our Redeemers is a great option. I do think we have to look at wants versus needs. I know it's a limited amount of funds that we have left over, thanks to the federal government, the state government, now us. We have some funds to take care of some things, and now you're seeing some additional expenses. Since it's in our coffers, there's this need to try and look at taking more away from the projects that we have here in front of us. I know we've received that email from a constituent about, well, let's look at some opportunities, and thanks to the mayor for bringing that up about the solar panels that we could dip into that. But the thing is looking at cost sharing with the city and the county. I appreciate Commissioner Dean's comment on that, because I think that's something that we should approach that conversation with them. I'm all in favor for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead, Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, perhaps I could lay out what could happen. And that is, we do have a joint city county commission meeting next week, and it seems like a while because that since we've had one because of the holidays.
Yeah.
It felt like just like the worst time, and so I think in everybody's best interest, we just canceled it. But it will happen next week. In the meantime, we've listened to your discussion tonight at the next administrative meeting. And we'll put this item on first in the agenda. And if there are any other questions as you go through your week, if you would let us know, that we would try to be prepared to address them at the next administrative meeting. I think we have the perfect opportunity to bring this up with the county commission at next week's meeting as well. And with the questions that you ask, just be prepared to address those at the next meeting and see where you land relative to further discussions on how you want to allocate those monies.
You bet.
Can I ask one final question?
You should, it's your fine.
It is. At our next admin meeting, could we also get an update as to what, and this goes back to my comments at the beginning of the meeting, what grants we're going to be pursuing from the bipartisan infrastructure bill and some of those that Senator Tester's office has offered to lend their support. I think that I do not want to see that opportunity pass us by. And
to the best of our ability, the answer would be yes.
Okay. And if it's not that one, I mean, sometime in the future. I think it pairs well with this conversation.
It does. Part of the problem we're having, and it's just the real world, is that inability to hire engineers makes it difficult to put together applications. And just with all the projects going on, it's a challenge. We just have to figure out our way through it. Right.
And I guess maybe if that's a conversation we need to have of like, do we need to utilize some funds to hire outside support for limited projects so that we can leverage additional dollars? I think that that's a worthwhile investment, but we also just need to know if that's required or not.
I think that's what they were going through already, because we heard that from Dr. McMahon and Dr. Danielson. I see your hand raised there, Commissioner Reed. What can we do for you?
Thank you. Apologies. I hopped online as fast as I could. Could someone give me just the briefest, what happens next? Because I tried to piece that together and I didn't understand, and I will make my comment accordingly.
Mayor, Commissioner, so we have a meeting next week with the joint city county commissions, at which point we're going to have the commission's going to have a brief discussion on potential partnerships with ARPA projects. At the next administrative meeting, we will schedule the ARPA discussion first. Address any questions that were brought up this evening by the commission. And if you have any questions from now until then, please let city staff know so that we can get prepared to address those as well. And then I think if and when you're ready, you can start talking about how you'd like to allocate ARPA funds.
Okay. Thank you. So the city county meeting will be discussing opportunities to collaborate on all projects or just on the ones that were presented as the brand new building?
Oh,
Oh, okay, thank you. That was going to be a question I had, so I will, that's all I have for now. Thanks.
yeah, thank you. Do we have any public comments? Yes, you have the floor. Please pull a mic.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Amy Teagarden. I'm the interim executive director for Tri-County Fire Safe Working Group. First of all, I'd like to take a moment to compliment city staff in launching what I thought was a very well thought out, user-friendly application and process format. And having done a lot of applications, this was really nice to see that. Just in response to a few of the scoring results for our application, I respectfully like to offer a few comments in relationship to economic development, vulnerable populations, and the quality of life. And while this project may not stimulate economic development, it will help mitigate the risk that will have negative economic impacts if we were to suffer a suburban wildfire. Just over a year ago, in December 21, a fast-moving wildfire covered 6,000 acres and destroyed property and lives just outside of Boulder, Colorado. And the impacts to that was 1,100 homes and businesses were lost at the value of $2 billion. So that's something to consider if we were to have that type of loss of property and lives. And the same scenario that happened in that wildfire could easily happen here in our community. Let's see what else. As a result of that fire, an analysis found that 67% of the homeowners who lost their homes did not have enough insurance to replace them. And it's kind of interesting about being in a housing crisis. That's another example of a housing crisis. As far as the vulnerable populations, anyone living in the wildland urban interface of high risk is a vulnerable population. So it's a different way to look at what we can define as a vulnerable population. Part of our wildfire risk assessment process would also help us identify what we normally refer to as vulnerable populations, those people that need special assistance for evacuation potential, perhaps assistance needing help in mitigating their risks. So some of that education and awareness will come out of those wildfire risk assessment processes too. So I'll keep it short. I just wanted to kind of challenge you to think about some of those elements a little bit differently. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Teagarden. Any other public comments?
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Chris Imany. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Carroll College. And first, I'd just like to say thank you so very much for the opportunity to submit our application. I think the need in this community throughout this process has become crystal clear, and it is so substantial. So moving our application to this stage and your further consideration, it's just something we're so grateful for. I'd like to add that Carol is eagerly looking forward to the opportunity to add to the economic development in this community with our project, in addition to enhancing the quality of life for all citizens of Helena through the various opportunities we plan to have associated with our enhancements at Nelson Stadium. Again, I thank you for your review. In addition, I'd say I also look forward to working with community groups to help make those impacts a reality as we move forward, and not just groups in Helena, but statewide, and which will provide the direct benefit to the people of Helena. So thank you so very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other public comments? Do you have anyone online, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I do have two hands raised online.
Okay,
Uh,
before we move there, is there any other person in this room? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Cal Poole. I'm the Director of Engagement for Helena Area Habitat for Humanity. I also appreciate the opportunity to come before you on this topic and the application process. I'm here to speak on behalf of our Redeemer's Lutheran Church Project, Habitat for Humanity is one of the partners, and I think that the things that we're hearing from the commission are right in line with what I think everyone in Helena is experiencing. This is a housing crisis that affects everybody. And even if you are able to live in a house right now, even if you purchased your house at a time when it was affordable, if you were to try and repurchase that home right now, I think you'd have a hard time doing it. We did the homeless census recently, and the amount of kids that are living in cars tonight in our city, the amount of people, the kids in the school district who are couch surfing, these are upstream issues that will have downstream impacts on our community. Housing is one of those Maslow's hierarchy of fundamental things you want to address and prevent as many adverse childhood experiences as you can, and those will pay dividends down the road. I think if we're able to invest this money right now, those upstream dollars, I think, are going to be really well spent. I thank you for your time and your work on this.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any others? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Paul Landis. I'm with the Helena Regional Sports Association and appreciate the chance to be here. I want to just take a couple of seconds. I'll be brief. We've been at this process now to try and build indoor sports facilities for close to 5 years, maybe 6 years. And I don't believe that there's any question in anybody's mind that there's a shortage. Indoor swimming pools, indoor basketball courts, indoor track, whatever. It just exists. We're going about this in a little bit different way because the facility that's going to be built, we're hoping and we're really pushing hard that it's got to be publicly run, not by the Helena Regional Sports Association. This is a facility that will serve the entire community, the city of Helena, the county. So part of the sustainability study, the purpose of it is really to identify those means and those methods to fund what is an anticipated shortfall. You don't make money in these facilities. And I imagine if we came to the city with a facility that said, here you go, it loses $200,000 a year, you're going to balk, or at least we'll have another discussion. So why spend all that money up front? We've identified internally half a dozen methods. We would like to have an independent study come back and not quantify our specific project, but say, here are the things out there. One of the biggest issue out there, the biggest one out there that has been pointed out to us is the county and the city through joint levies for park operating and maintenance expenses. That not only helps with the facility we have intention to build, but it also is a big help in the rest of the parks that you have here in the city. So we're going about this, it almost looks like it's backwards. Why are you doing this instead of going out and buying the land and design a facility and all that? We know what the facility will look like. We just don't have the specifics of it. We want to make sure that it is sustainable. That's why it's a sustainability study. Arranging for the financing, arranging for the design, arranging for all that can be done. At this point, we're not looking for help on public financing. What we're looking for is the ability to build a facility, have an operating plan in place so that when a public entity takes control of it, it's financially sustainable for years. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, do we have any others? Madam Clerk.
First up in the queue is Bruce Day.
You have the floor, Mr. Day.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor Collins and Commissioners, and just wanted to take a brief moment or two to one, thank the commission and staff for the opportunity and for this process to apply for some of the ARPA funds that may be available. This project that we are proposing for Helena Food Share of building a new community food resource center, a new facility from which Helena Food Share could continue to serve the community now and into the future, is a very important project for the community. I think it's one that I think we're all aware would have a wide impact and a deep impact on families and individuals in our community. More than 8,000 individuals in a year, not including the kids in our schools that are served. And so I would simply say that we would really appreciate consideration of the grant requests that we're making of these funds from the city, a grant of ARPA funds from the city would provide an important amount of support for helping us bring this project to completion. And as we enter what is now the final phase of funding this project and looking to begin construction in the near future, in the summer of 2023, it's a project that is ready to go. Will have a big impact on serving vulnerable populations and meeting other priorities in the future. Again, thank you. Our appreciation for all of your support and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Madam Clerk.
Next up, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have Dr. Gregory Thomas.
You have the floor, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. 2 points. The developers who spoke today are in large part responsible for the onerous and restrictive zoning regulations enacted during the past 20 years in states like Montana that are directly to blame for the current housing crisis that has snowballed during the past 40+ years because of corruption, greed, and voter apathy at levels far beyond the borders of our lovely town. While our efforts within the boundaries of Helena on this issue are admirable and noteworthy and should be supported, this issue, much like our homeless crisis, neither one of those issues were created overnight, and we need to appreciate the fact that it's going to take a significant amount of time in order for us to be able to effectively address them. And we are going to have to continue to call on resources far outside of the bounds of our lovely town in order to properly address them. Second point, economic conditions in Helena have progressively worsened during the past 2 years for the over 50% of Helenans who are recognized as being considered low-income households. These households in our community are daily having to decide whether to put food on the table for their families or put more gas in the truck to keep going back and forth to work each day, let alone this homeless problem that we have in our town. At the same time, during the past few months, many of us have been reaching out to officials at Carroll College to what we perceive to be no avail. Carroll is a private institution with a $50 million plus endowment. They have an attorney earning 6 figures annually to continue to help them raise money from wealthy donors to increase that endowment. No matter how many ways they want to deflect attention by pointing to other sources, the fact is they are in fact paying over $18,000 an hour at a minimum 5-hour requirement to charter jumbo jets to take their sports teams back and forth to away games. And they're coming to the city to ask for our hard-earned federal tax dollars for their stadium when they have resources like this available, when we have life-threatening issues that we're talking about needing to be funded with those same ARPA dollars? If graduates of Carroll on the commission and others on the commission previously identified by Carroll officials believe in the stadium project, then perhaps they might want to consider stepping up and donating their money instead of our hard-earned tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, do we have any others?
I have one more hand raised, Mr. Mayor, Renee Bauer.
You have the floor, Ms. Bauer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I am calling tonight from Phoenix. A lot warmer.
Ma'am, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry. I am calling you in Phoenix tonight because I have been down here for a couple of days with Family Promise directors from 10 other Western states, where we have talked a lot about the homeless family problem that is prevalent all across the United States, but certainly in the Western states. One of the things that I'm going to get to bring back is ideas, models, and best practices from other communities of our size in how to structure a facility, the engineering plans, and different methods to start to aggressively address the homeless issue with children and their families. I'm pretty excited about this. I think it's going to be valuable information that we as a community can look at and collectively try to analyze and see what might work best in the community of Helena. Of course, Family Promise of Greater Helena already is working on these issues from our 10 years of experience and resources there, but I think new ideas are always a great thing. Just wanted to thank the commission and mayor for your ongoing work in helping our community address this huge problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have no other hands raised. I have no written public comment online.
Thank you. Any final comments from the commission? This time, this meeting is adjourned.